Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to give you an in-depth interpretation of How to Win Friends and Influence People, a classic on interpersonal relationships that has sold over 90 million copies worldwide over the past century. I believe you've all heard of the author of this book, Dale Carnegie, who is recognized as the greatest mentor and master of success in the 20th century. After its publication, How to Win Friends and Influence People was immediately acclaimed by people from all walks of life as the Bible of communication skills. So, what kind of life wisdom is contained in this best-selling book that has influenced countless people? Today I'm going to take you to explore the three core contents of this book. Carnegie points out through this book that there are three major weaknesses in human nature, which often undermine interpersonal relationships and lead to disharmony. One is that casual criticism and complaints damage interpersonal relationships. When we casually criticize and complain about others, the other party's psychology will immediately activate a self-protection mechanism. Because no one likes to be criticized, no matter how close a friend or family member. Carnegie uses a wonderful analogy, saying that our criticism of others is like a well-trained pigeon. Although it is released, it will eventually fly back to its owner. That is to say, our criticism and complaints against others today will eventually find their way back to us through various channels, which will only make the relationship between the two sides increasingly rigid. Therefore, Carnegie advises us to control the impulse to criticize and complain at all times. Because criticism and complaints cannot solve any problem, they can only have a negative impact on interpersonal relationships. Second is to refute casually when hearing different opinions. Self-expression is an important human need. However, Carnegie points out that when we hear views that differ from our own, we often subconsciously refute them in order to satisfy our own need for self-expression. However, such refutation will not make the other party accept our view, but rather make them more stubborn. Because in a debate, people's self-esteem will require them to adhere to their own position. So Carnegie suggests that in the face of different opinions, we should not easily refute, but patiently listen, and then carefully express our own views, which is more persuasive. Third is that errors need to be bravely acknowledged rather than ignored. In work and life, mistakes are inevitable. But our human nature makes us reluctant to face mistakes, often choosing to turn a blind eye. Carnegie points out that this kind of evasive approach will only exacerbate the problem. We need to face mistakes, dare to admit them, and deal with them in a rational and reasonable way. Since human nature has the above weaknesses, how do we overcome these weaknesses and establish good interpersonal relationships? Carnegie gave three principles. First, learn to put yourself in the other person's position and understand. Carnegie believes that putting yourself in the other person's position is the highest realm of interpersonal relationships. It can help us understand the other person's feelings and needs, thereby promoting a win-win situation. Carnegie gives a vivid analogy. When we go fishing, we study what bait the fish like to eat. Similarly, in interpersonal interactions, we should also stand in the other person's position and consider what the other person needs. That way, we can proactively satisfy the other person's needs, and the other person will also more naturally help us. Putting ourselves in the other person's position is the golden rule of interpersonal interaction. Second, pay attention to listening and allow the other person to fully express themselves. Self-expression is also an important human need. Therefore, in communication, we should give the other person enough listening time to allow them to express their views and feelings as much as possible. This can make the other person feel valued and respected. Good listening also helps us better understand the other person and find ways to solve problems. Third, make the other person feel valued. People crave to be valued, which is a basic psychological need. Carnegie suggests three ways to make the other person feel very important. First, remember the other person's name. This is the most direct way to express appreciation. Second, give sincere praise. Insincerity is useless, but sincere appreciation can make the other person feel cherished. Third, care about the other person's needs. Put yourself in their shoes, let them feel special. If we follow Carnegie's principles and establish good interpersonal relationships, we can further enhance our influence on this basis. Carnegie proposed two specific principles. One is the principle of seeking common ground. Emphasizing common goals and avoiding unnecessary disputes. Carnegie believes that when communicating with people, we should emphasize the common ground and consensus with the other party, and try to avoid differences of opinion and disputes to the greatest extent. Because once disputes arise, Both sides will stick to prejudice and refuse to compromise. Continuing communication at this time is a waste of time. Therefore, we should focus on the parts that both parties agree on, and gradually guide the other party to approach our position through these consensus, which is the master stroke. Second is the participation principle. Let the other party participate in your ideas and thus accept them. It is very difficult to directly force others to accept your ideas. Carnegie proposes an efficient way to let the other party participate in your ideas and turn from an onlooker into a co-creator. For example, you can ask the other party to propose modifications to your ideas. Thus, the idea becomes the result of the other's participation, and the other party will naturally be more likely to accept it. By letting the other party participate, eventually making the other party feel that the idea also belongs to him, herself, such a shift in thinking can greatly enhance your influence. The above is my detailed interpretation of how to win friends and influence people. Based on human weaknesses, Carnegie has given practical and effective coping methods. I believe these valuable life experiences will be greatly beneficial to everyone's work and life. If you like my video, please subscribe to my channel and see you next time.